Hey YouTube, welcome to our new video. After receiving some positive feedback from your side, after we had our last unscripted video on the beginning of February, we have decided to try another one. And here's the one. So welcome again, and this time around we are doing a video on comparison between Ubuntu 22.04, which is now in beta, and it was released as beta the other day, and Ubuntu 20.04 long-term support, which has been around for 2 years now and will be for another 3 years. Again, 22.04 is also an LTS release. It will be around for about 5 years, and it's very important for those users that have been using long-term support releases of Ubuntu, one of the most popular and most important Linux-based operating systems in the world. So we have decided to target this video for the users that use or have been using LTS releases or intend to use Ubuntu LTS long-term support releases. And all the new things that are in Ubuntu 22.04 right now are actually new for those who are using LTS releases, because in these short-term releases some of these changes have already been introduced. So without further ado, let's dive into it. So here we have our standard Ubuntu 20.04 long-term support release that we have installed 2 years ago, and we have been using it ever since for our production purposes. More precisely, this particular installation, which is one of our installs, we mostly use for testing VirtualBox within the VirtualBox different Linux-based operating systems. For this particular video, we have created 4 different virtual machines, but we'll discuss more of it later on during the video. So let's begin with 20.04, with Ubuntu LTS 20.04, because we have made a list or a script of changes, mostly those most important and most obvious ones, because this video, as with other of our videos, is dedicated to new Linux users or less experienced new Linux users, so we will not go into technical details so much, because this is something strange, we believe, for new users or unexperienced users. So there are many changes and many new things in Ubuntu 22.04, but we will discuss in this video mainly those on the surface who are most obvious and concerning UI, user experience, user interface, and things that users will feel and experience the most. Okay, so let's dive in. As I've said, we have made a list of changes in Ubuntu 22.04 compared to Ubuntu 20.04. So our main point is that now Ubuntu 22.04 has a new display saver. As you can see here in our present machine, let's go into settings. As you can see in this, our build windowing system in 20.0 in Ubuntu 20.04 LTS is X11 or XOR, which is, to say in plain English, an old technology, a little bit old technology. It works perfectly, it's been mature for a long time, and simply it's reliable, and Ubuntu have been using it for some time. But there's a new technology which is called Wayland, and now the Wayland is the default display server in Ubuntu 22.04, and we will show you that right now, because we will open the VirtualBox and our 22.04 virtual machine, which we hope our computer will handle it properly, because we are recording the screen, and at the same time we will show you several virtual machines, and we will switch between those machines as the video goes on. So let me here type in our password. Okay, now we will make it full screen, and as I said, Ubuntu 22.04 has a new display server, and it's Wayland. Here it is. It's a new technology. Many people in the forums, in comment sections of different websites claim that it's not been finished, it's not honed yet in the way Xorg is, but it works, it's been improved all the time, and as far as I know, it's been introduced in GNOME 42, which is the latest version of the GNOME desktop environment, which is also a default desktop environment in mainline Ubuntu 22.04. As you can see here, GNOME version of Ubuntu 22.04 is GNOME version 42. That's first thing we want to mention in this video. Next difference between those two LTSs that we want to point out to is there's been a lot of changes concerning user interface and user experience in Ubuntu 22.04. Just a small digression, as you may have already known, English is not our native language, so if we make some mistake here and there, please don't be harsh on us. Try to speak in a foreign language for a couple of minutes, and not to mention 20 minutes or so, and you'll see how difficult this can be, and without being prepared, without a script to read. This is going as live, so nothing is prepared. As I've said, this is our unscripted video, and we hope you like it anyway. Never mind. Let's go on. So now another difference that Ubuntu 22.04 has introduced is concerning the look and feel of the system. So let's go to the settings app, and here in the appearance section, now as you can see, there are only two default themes, light and dark themes, and that's the first difference for you who didn't use interim releases of Ubuntu like 20.10, 21.04 or 21.10. For those of you who are still on 20.04 LTS Focal Fossa, you have the three default themes, and let me show you this right now. You'll see that. Okay. Here in the appearance section, as you can see, we have three themes: light, standard, and dark. And in the 22.04, we have light and dark themes. That's the first difference concerning UI between those two operating systems. Next obvious difference is accent colors. Ubuntu has finally introduced accent colors, and now as you can see there, they have like 10 options. The orange is default one, as you may have known, but we have, for this particular build in this virtual machine, we have chosen this one for our operating system. Again, this is not the default wallpaper for Ubuntu 22.04. Let me show you the default one. It's very nice. People have praised it with a good reason. But for the video, we have chosen this one, which we find also very nice and beautiful. So that's the second difference that Ubuntu 22.04 has introduced, and we believe it's a nice addition. Now Ubuntu, in our view, looks even more professional and polished. There are also some other additions, and we will discuss them right now. Another key difference is that concerning the look and feel of the system is now that when you introduce the dark mode in Ubuntu 22.04, it's really dark mode and it's dark everywhere. Let me show you this. It's really dark everywhere, and all the apps, native apps, respect the dark theme. The change is instant, and although this system is installed within the VirtualBox, it really works perfectly for us, and you can see it's really, really good. I'm saying, I'll just remind you that Ubuntu 22.04 is still in beta phase, but everything works fine, everything is stable, and these little things, little details like changing color themes or accent colors works perfectly. Let's go back to 20.04. When you here introduce the dark color, you see it's not consistently dark as it is within the new Ubuntu version. Let's go back to the light theme, and just to mention that standard theme, there's no more standard theme in 22.04, and its main feature was that some elements of the desktop were dark and some of the elements of desktop still remain light. In Ubuntu 22.04, everything is, how can I say, light or dark, either light. Let's go back to the default light as we have had it before, because obviously this is our heavily modified Ubuntu 20.04 build, which we have been using for months, or even better to say years now. Next thing we want to speak about when it comes to the differences between old and new versions of Ubuntu is desktop. You may agree with this or not, but so many computer users who are coming to Linux from Windows, for instance, they are used to the fact that they can use their desktop to make a quick file, to put it on desktop, to finish their job and delete it and forget about it. In many Linux systems, it's not possible. Desktop serves only for showing nice pictures. In Ubuntu, developers, in Ubuntu 20.04, developers try to enable desktop functionality, but it's not functional as it should be. Let me first go back to Ubuntu, new Ubuntu build, in order not to have problems with memory and so that our video do not stuck. We will for now close the VirtualBox. Let me show you what I mean by this. We will, for the sake of the video, we will make a text file in Writer, and we will literally call it test file, which we will save in the documents folder. And now, if you want to, for instance, move this test file to the desktop, you can't do it in 20.04. As you can see, there's no way. The only thing you can actually do is to cut it and then to enter the desktop as a folder and then paste it, and the file will appear on your desktop. You can now, even in 20.04, delete the file by just drag and drop it in the trash can. But certain things, as you've just seen, you can do in Ubuntu 20.04 with the desktop. And in new Ubuntu version, you can do that. Actually, behavior is totally different, and this is something we believe you have been accustomed to in proprietary operating systems such as Windows, for instance. Let me start the virtual machine again. It will take just several seconds, so don't worry about this. This is our mid-range machine, but it's not that bad at all. Okay, let's make it full screen, and now we will try to do the same in Ubuntu 22.04. We will start LibreOffice Writer, which, having in mind that the operating system is installed within the VirtualBox, it works perfectly fast. Again, we will save file in the documents folder, save the file in the documents folder as test. And now we will try to do the same. If you want to move the file, you can do it in Ubuntu 22.04, which actually means that now your desktop is a working desktop in Ubuntu 20.04 and 22.04. And speaking of the desktop, in 22.04, now by default folders and files are grouped in the bottom right hand corner, as you can see here. This is not done by us. We didn't do this, but this folder to the bottom of the right hand corner, it's automatically by default. So this is a new behavior in Ubuntu 22.04, and it's just a matter of preference. I believe in somewhere in the settings, in the system settings, you can change this if you want, but we believe this is just a small detail and it doesn't deserve such attention. Another key difference between Ubuntu 20.04 LTS and Ubuntu 22.04 LTS is Workspaces. Actually, in the new Ubuntu, as you can see, Workspaces are horizontal. You can see here, I'm pointing at them, and accordingly, your app launcher, full screen app launcher, is also horizontal. Now, let me demonstrate you this. We will open like File Manager and Web Browser, and Web Browser is something we will discuss later. Again, this is in the VirtualBox, but it's reasonably fast. And now, when we start, you can see virtual spaces are horizontal, and a full screen app grid or app launcher, as you wish, is horizontal. So we have an old, so to say, GNOME desktop behavior. When you close an application, it decreases the number of virtual workspaces. So now we had like 4 2 minutes ago, and now we have 2 of them. Let me remind you, in Ubuntu 20.04 LTS, Workspaces and App Grid or App Launcher are vertical, as you can see. And if we open a file manager, you see, if I want to switch Workspaces, everything is on the right hand side. So it's just a change of the workflow. Nothing is basically changed. Many popular Linux-based operating systems, such as Elementary OS, have the same behavior, and we think, users will get accustomed to this very easily, and it's not a problem at all. If you still want to stick to the old way of doing things, it's not a problem. Ubuntu 20.04 will be supported for another 3 years, and you don't have to really change anything. But speaking of the app launcher, there's another difference between those two operating systems. Here in Ubuntu 20.04 LTS, as you've probably noticed, the apps that you put as your favorites in the Ubuntu dock, again, they are in the app launcher too. For instance, as you can see here, we have Firefox in the app launcher and at the same time we have Firefox in the Ubuntu dock. Now we have completely different behavior here in Ubuntu 22.04. Let me show you. For instance, here we have Firefox in the Ubuntu dock, but again Firefox is not in the app launcher. Or Chromium web browser that we installed here, it's in the app launcher, but it's not in the Ubuntu dock. Another thing is, if you open the app, an app that is not in the Ubuntu dock, for instance, let's say settings, you'll see that now you have the separator in the Ubuntu dock, which wasn't there before, and it separates apps that are favorites and those that are not favorites and that are, how can I say, randomly open. So that's another key difference between those two operating systems, and we think that's also an improvement and gives you a chance to make difference while working, while you have many apps open, between those that are favorites and those that are not favorites. Again, speaking of the Ubuntu dock, there's another difference between those two operating systems. Some of the users that remember the times when Ubuntu used its own desktop environment, Unity desktop environment, one of its main features was that trash can was in the Ubuntu dock. And this practice has been abandoned for years because, let me show you again, for instance in Ubuntu 20.04, trash can was not in the Ubuntu dock, but instead it's been placed on the desktop. Again, in Ubuntu 22.04, in new Ubuntu, Jammy Jellyfish, now again you have the trash can in the Ubuntu dock, which is another maybe small difference, but significant difference between those two operating systems. Another small difference between those two long-term support operating systems is that, for instance, let me show you, in the app launcher, you can hardly make difference between those two apps, and those are very two important apps, which is software updates and software and updates app that handles your app sources. They're almost the same, and sometimes you can mistakenly hit one for another. In new Ubuntu, there's a new icon for software and updates, and you can't really now mistaken one for another, because they're now obviously different. In Ubuntu 20.204, also another difference has been introduced, and it is concerning the power options. For instance, here you have, let me show you, more options concerning turning off your computer, logging out, and restarting the system. You can, immediately and just with one click enter those options. Just for the sake of the video, let me power off this system. And now let me remind you, in the old version it wasn't like that. Restart, for instance, restart option was not there. You really had to enter the power off menu, a window, and then you have had a chance to restart the system. Because now we are recording the screen, I will not show you that right now, but many users know what I'm talking about. Another improvement in new Ubuntu, and let me enter the system again. And we believe this new feature will be very helpful for users, especially those content creators. And let me show you again, just to type in my login password. Let's make it full screen again. Okay, it's screenshot tool. Now it's really professional. You can, as you can see, select an area of the screen. You can select entire screen or window, and not only that, you can switch between photos, pictures of your screen, or videos. You can do a screencast, so it's really a nice addition to the system. And that's another thing Ubuntu 22.04 brings in, and that's a part of the wider GNOME 42 package, which was introduced in the Ubuntu 22.04. But as I've said before, we will not speak about technical details so much, because for an average Joe it doesn't mean anything, is it? GNOME 41 or GNOME 42, we believe it's irrelevant for users who just want their system to work out of the box. So they are only interested in installing and using applications and nothing behind that. But still, we have to touch upon certain technical details, and we will try to keep it simple as much as it's possible. Because, for instance, it's about the default browser in Ubuntu 22.04. The default browser in the system is, of course, as it's been for years now, Firefox. But now, packaging system of Firefox has been changed. In Ubuntu 22.04, Firefox is a snap, which means it's taken from the Snap software platform, which is Ubuntu's own Canonical's. Canonical is a company which stands behind Ubuntu, which is Canonical's software platform, and it's been criticized for a year now by many users that it's slow and that applications are slow to start when used as snaps in comparison to regular deb packages from Ubuntu repositories. But honestly, we've been using this Ubuntu virtual machine for quite some time now, since its inception, actually since it was released as beta, and we hadn't had that sort of problems. It really starts reasonably fast, and we really cannot complain about that at all. As you can see for the video, we didn't edit anything and we didn't fake anything, and it really starts reasonably fast. So it doesn't mean we support Snap platform as such. It just means that an average user will not notice any difference, and it works out of the box, which is, in our opinion, a point of all of it. Still, those experienced Linux users, and of course including experienced Ubuntu users, they still, in our view, have the solution for Snap, so-called Snap issue, namely in Ubuntu 22.04 you can install Synaptic Package Manager, and in that way you can access all the apps from official Ubuntu repositories. For instance, well, let me search for Audacity. So here you have version from the Ubuntu repositories, standard Ubuntu repositories. But an average Joe would probably use version from the Software Center, and there Audacity is by default offers the Snap Store, but you can also install it from the repositories via Snap Store too. As you can see here, Audacity is also offered from Ubuntu Jammy Universe as a deb file, as a deb package, sorry. So you're not forced to use snaps if you don't want to. There are ways to remove snaps altogether, but this is not for beginner users, and this is not what we would recommend beginners users to do anyway. But if you want to use the system as it is, there's no problem. We have been using it now for some time, and we hadn't had any issues, and it's even if it is in beta phase right now as of the time of recording this video, and we are certain that it will even improve when it's publicly released for wider audience for average users. That's why we frequently in several of our last videos recommend distros like, for instance, Zorin OS. Let me turn off this, because Ubuntu is an excellent operating system. It's been a base for many and various Linux-based operating systems, but sometimes it feels like it's not finished article, and that's why we recommend distros like I've said, for instance, Zorin OS. Let me start the version we installed for the video in the VirtualBox, and we'll show you right now why we mentioned this at all. Altogether, it will take also just several seconds because it's in VirtualBox and it's rather fast, bearing in mind that it's not on a bare metal but in the VirtualBox. Let me make this full screen too, because let me show you, in Zorin OS 16.1, its latest version, it's based on Ubuntu 20.04, which means an older version at the time of recording this video of Ubuntu, but still you have more choices than in Ubuntu itself. It's not just Ubuntu with fancy customization. I mean, Zorin is not just another version of Ubuntu with fancy customization, it's much more than that. By default here you get more choices for software. We'll take Audacity Audio Editor as an example, and here you have more choices. You have version from repositories. It says here Zorin OS, but actually it's from Ubuntu repositories, and as a flatpak from FlatHub software platform, which is more popular and software platform than Snap within the Linux community. And still, if you use snaps and love snaps, you can use it even as a snap too. So that's the advantage of the systems like Zorin. Here's the version 2.3.3, and this one, there is a difference, and for a reason. This is the newer version, 3.1.3. It's also from the FlatHub and from the repositories, but let me show you some other programs. For instance, Shotcut, it's from the Snap Store. So Shotcut, a very popular video editor. So what I wanted to say is that Zorin OS, for instance, offers a better choice when it comes to software availability. So you have, as I've said, a choice to install apps from Ubuntu repositories or from Zorin repositories, from the FlatHub and from the Snap software platforms. And not to mention that although it's an older version of the GNOME desktop environment, let me show you this too. By default and out of the box, you see it's an older version of GNOME. We can tell this by file manager, for instance. It's version 3.36.3 from the old version of GNOME, but it's really nicely customized. The system is very beautiful, and it offers out of the box many things which Ubuntu wasn't offering at the time of the 20.04. Let me open the Zorin Appearance app, where you can not only change the workflow but a theme. They have been offering accent colors for years now, and similar stuff concerning interface. They have the very popular jelly mode, wobbly windows. You can customize the desktop to have or not have icons on the desktop, and so on and so on. Or if you don't like the GNOME desktop environment at all and the blink it brings in, let me power this off, you can go with something classical And for the video we have prepared Linux Mint Mate edition, which is, I believe, for some, so to say, older users of operating systems, because it's really reminiscent of Windows XP times, so to say. And you'll see now what I mean by that. It's really classical desktop, and with classical look and feel, and there are no snaps. We have the issue with this particular virtual machine. When you make it full screen, you'll see it tears the screen, and there's a small trick. You just need to log out of the system, and when you log back in, everything is fine. If you know the solution and what should we do about this, tell us in the comment section down below. But as I've said, it's Linux Mint 20.3 with Mate desktop. It works perfectly, and there are no snaps. They have Flatpaks and Ubuntu repositories only. Even apps like Firefox and Chromium browser are deb packages from repositories and not snaps or Flatpaks at all. So if you're not a fan of modern desktop environments such as GNOME is, you can go with this one. Or if you're of an adventurous spirit but still like the stability, we also have prepared for you a suggestion, and that's a Solus OS, which is totally independent Linux distribution. It's not based on Arch nor on Ubuntu, and they have their own desktop environment, which is called Budgie, and it has many bits of pieces from GNOME desktop environment, but it's its own thing, and it's also a, so to say, a combination of old and new things, with maybe of the old workflow, but it's new in terms of technology. Solus and Budgie are an excellent choice, and we have it on one of our machines, but we have prepared an edition just for the sake of this video. Critics say that Solus OS does not offer as many apps as Ubuntu or Debian or Arch, but still we have been using Solus for ages on some of our machines, and we have always found the apps we needed for the job to get done, so we really didn't have problems like that when it comes to Solus, because they have a particular section within their software manager called third party, and there you can find the apps that are not in the official repositories, and those apps sometimes you can have issues to install them in Linux-based operating systems, but not in Solus. You can install them through one-click install, like you can see here, like Viber or Google Chrome or anything like that. So those are the main points and main differences between those two operating systems. We hope you've enjoyed this video, and we hope you'll find it useful, and thanks for watching, and of course, as we always say, see you next time.